Thank you all for being here. We were wondering if it would be SR, and OMG, it is. Thank you very much. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this panel. I want to introduce the Suffolk folk first, and then we're going to get to the really good part, which is our entrepreneurs. So first of all, Alexis Brooks was going to be the co-moderator here. Unfortunately, she had something arise and couldn't make it. From Mirtha Cullinan, we thank her very much for her help in planning this session, and we hope all is well. I am Professor Sherry Worthington here in the Entrepreneurship Department, and I am also Associate Director of the Center for Entrepreneurship here at Suffolk. And I'm also a serial entrepreneur, so I have so many hats on today. It's just crazy. But I'd like to introduce the big cheese in charge, who is Professor Chaim Letwin. He is the head of the entrepreneurship program here at Suffolk, and he's also the Carol Sawyer Parks Endowed Chair for Entrepreneurship. So look at all his hats as well. So Chaim and I are going to be co-moderating, and I'm going to turn it over to my partner in crime.
So that's the first time I've ever been called a big cheese. I kind of liked it. Well, I want to just start off. Hello, everybody. You know, we are just honored at Suffolk to be able to host Startup Week in 2023. Stephanie and her team and the Startup Week team have just been amazing to work with, and we've loved working with them. You know, Startup Week it's all about community, meeting, learning from and connecting with our community, our startup community, our business community. And that's exactly what we focus on here at Suffolk University and in our Center for Entrepreneurship, being deeply immersed with our vibrant business community. So I thought it was a perfect fit. And speaking about community, today we are joined by what I believe to be just an all-star panel of business leaders in our community. All the panelists are great friends of the university and have been amazingly generous with their time, their expertise, and their resources in helping our students in so many different, innovative, and creative ways. They really embody the idea of paying it forward. And I think that's so important in the entrepreneurial context, to just remember to pay it forward, you know, the next time and the next time and the next time. So we're super excited to be here to continue to learn from their knowledge and expertise. So let me go ahead and introduce our panel. I'm going to start with Wes Stroll. He's in the middle right here. Wes is a serial entrepreneur who started his first company when he was 14 years old. After two small startup ventures, he wrote a business plan for Fetch during his sophomore year in college. So for all of our freshmen, just recognize it's doable, right? Start moving. He used that plan to win over $180,000 in cash, office space, and other prizes from business school plan competitions. We have them, so come and join them. And since that time, amazingly, he has built his company to over 750 employees. And today, Fetch is a bona fide unicorn with a valuation over $2.5 billion.
We also want to mention that Fetch is a sponsor of our app design-a-thon that we run once a year, and we actually work with some of their product team and our students from a number of our different courses and bring them together into teams to create new and innovative ways to interact with the app. So it's really a wonderful partnership that we've created. So thank you, Wes. I would like to introduce, to my right, Eric Papachristos. So Eric is the founder, owner, and CEO at A Street Hospitality Group. He is a restaurateur extraordinaire. His brands include Trade, Porto, Saloniki Greek, The Venetian, and soon to open La Padrona at the brand new Raffles Hotel in Back Bay, which I don't know where it is. I got to go find that. His group has over 10 locations in the Boston area, and they've been recognized as culinary royalty by Boston Magazine. That's pretty cool. Eric's constant travels to his homeland of Greece and Europe have helped foster his affinity for Mediterranean cuisine, which you can find throughout his restaurant group, and his desire to bring people together over a good meal. You just can't beat that. Eric is a serial entrepreneur, and he has other interests, and he's currently developing a 200-unit residential neighborhood in the South Shore. His commitment to community and giving back is cornerstone of his career. He's been part of the Pan Mass Challenge for 13 years and has raised over $1 million for the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. Thank you, Eric. And I just want to add an aside because I can't help it. Chaim's right here. Thank you on behalf of Chaim, because if Chaim could, he would eat every single meal, every single day at Saloniki. Just warning you.
Kind of true. And lastly, of course, we have Don Bullins. He's currently the executive chair at Cloud Zero, a leader in cloud cost intelligence. But Don's got a ton of experience in the CEO position at tech-focused companies. He's been a 5-time CEO at venture capital-backed tech-focused companies since the mid-1990s. These companies include Unidesk, EqualLogic, which was acquired for $1.4 billion, Trellix Corporation, and RadNet. So thank you so much for being here, Don. Okay, now we can really get into it. Real quick, the way we're going to run this panel is Sherry and I have some general questions that we're going to ask all 3 of our panelists to answer, and then we're going to have some directed questions for each panelist with some follow-up conversation. Then I went and I solicited questions from a group of our freshmen. Some of them may or may not be here, and we're going to ask a few of them and open it up to questions from the audience. So Sherry, why don't you get us started?
All right. So I have a question for all of the panelists. If you could each give us an overview of how you got into your respected journey for your ventures. Tell us about that. What stands out as important traits, experience, actions that led you to this career path? So shall we start on the far end? Don, you want to get us started?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I spent the first 20 years of my career working at big companies and always in go-to-market roles, marketing and sales. And then the last company I was at was a company called Lotus Development, which probably no one here knows about.
I know.
But it was one of the most successful software companies in the Boston area and actually in the world. And there I rose from a sales rep position to senior vice president of the company. And through that, and from there, 2 entrepreneurs out of Lotus had started a company, and they recruited me to come in as their CEO. And that was the first of 5 CEO roles. And a year and a half ago, I hired someone to succeed me at Cloud Zero. The things that were important, and by the way, I had never expected that I would become an entrepreneur, certainly not become a CEO. And it was the rich experiences I had, especially at Lotus, that actually built my skill set to be able to succeed in that. And in every case, I've been brought in by brilliant technologists who wanted to get a partner that could really focus on go-to-market and scaling a company. So what traits were important to me? Actually, I'd say there are 3 that have been critical. The first is attitude. The second is curiosity. And the third is energy. And I'll start with energy for just a second. One of the things that I found that was really important in my advancement in my career was working harder than everyone around me. That actually becomes really important as you're a founder or CEO because you're setting an example for everyone else. The other part of that energy is that, energy is infectious. And so if you're energetic and positive with a positive attitude, that's going to lift the contribution of everyone on your team, and it's going to inspire them. Curiosity is super important because if you're not curious, you're not going to learn. And if you don't help your team be curious, you're not going to learn together.
Thank you, Don. Shall we come down here, Wes?
Sure. So my journey, I would say, started while I was still in high school at Acton Boxborough. Any other grads? Anyone? One? Okay, we got one. That's fine. We're representing. I was fortunate to actually identify what I was passionate on while I was still in school. at Acton, it was in between playing sports, which I love because I like being a part of a team. I always just thought it was really fun to try to be collectively trying to do something. And you had all these huge ups and downs throughout the games that you would play. And that was just a ton of fun for me. I always wanted to chase that higher low. I don't remember a single game from high school, but I remember chasing the feelings of the highs and lows, trying to keep the team together and just trying to accomplish and end tasks together. So I love that, but I knew I wasn't good enough to play those professionally. So I was like, that probably won't be a good line of work for me to go into. So the other thing I found out that I really liked was solving problems that I didn't think had been solved well, or that no one else had tried to solve yet. So that's where I tested out with two different other, I guess in hindsight, call them startups while I was in high school. But when I started Fetch, I was actually already going to school at University of Wisconsin-Madison. And in between my freshman and sophomore year, I moved out of the dorm where I was being fed every meal in a cafeteria and into an apartment where I had to go and grocery shop for the first time ever. And my mom constantly told me, save money, like focus on saving money. And it was a pain. I hated having to sign up for all the different loyalty programs, try to figure out coupons, do all these different things. And I became obsessed with, okay, well, if this company really cares about me as a consumer, why aren't they treating me as the most important part of it, trying to give me a fun, exciting way to do that? So I ended up dropping out after my sophomore year to start Fetch with the sole purpose of how do we make it fun and easy to save money and something that's super approachable that anyone would be able to pick up their phone and be able to do. So again, I think a lot of what Don said was very true for me in terms of the characteristic. One is I was super curious about why wasn't this being done a different way. Once I identified, I just assumed, hey, well, why can't I be the one who does this? So I went after it and just started to learn from those folks around me, and being just eternally curious and surrounding yourself with people who are interested in solving those same problems gave me that team aspect that I was looking for. And that was 10 years ago at this point, since I started the business. And throughout those 10 years, I think those same characteristics are what have led us to be successful, to be where we're at today. But yeah, early on, I would say it's just look for the problem that you're trying to solve. Take the time to actually go and look to see what else is out there. It can be really disheartening when you find someone doing something similar to what you thought was a super unique idea, but it's okay. Lots of people are doing what Fetch was doing. And then just go and try to figure out what you could do that would be different and better than anyone else. And then just obsess over that. If you can obsess over that and focus inward on yourself and developing the best product possible, the rest kind of takes care of itself as you build a really good team. So that's what we focus on, and it's done well so far on it.
Obsession. I love it. Yeah. Eric, answer the questions.
How do I follow up with both of those? So my culinary career in hospitality was not traditional. I didn't go to culinary school. Actually, studied finance, undergraduate, got an MBA, got a little bit bored when I got another master's in finance. And sort of, I thought my career was always going to be in finance. Worked at Harvard for my sort of first part of my career, then went over to Ropes and Gray. But sort of my immigrant story when I came to the US when I was 9 was working at my dad's little diner and kind of washing dishes. And I never got past washing dishes, believe it or not. But what was really great was really seeing the value of a guest or a customer, and really the value of a dollar. And I think that to me is one of the most important cornerstones of my entrepreneurial journey. And then the second cornerstone for me is really my academics. What was really great studying business was I was able to really understand what is accounting, what is finance, what is marketing, what is HR, what is organizational behavior development. And all of those things were really, really important for me as I was thinking, what am I really passionate about? And throughout my whole academic career, I was bartending at nights. Did my internship at a financial services firm. It was cool, but it just wasn't for me. There's something about it really didn't speak. And had my first opportunity when I was young to really open up my first venture almost 17 years ago. And so, to what Wes had mentioned and Don, I was trying to figure out why and how do I want to do this? And the ultimate had nothing to do with money, had nothing to do with finances, it had nothing to do with success. It really was, what am I really passionate about? And so I was passionate because I learned to do this, from an early age, watching my dad. And also for me now, serving guests at our restaurants, again, kind of goes back to that. My passion is really actually watching, going to the old world, right? Whether it's backcountry Europe or, visiting my relatives in Greece and just watching grandmothers cook. Grandfathers don't really cook in Greece, but watching the grandmothers cook. And that to me is a passion. It's an art that gets passed from generation to generation to generation. So I was able to really take something that I'm extremely passionate about, and then all sort of the academics that I learned about business, and kind of put those two together. And then incredibly hardworking, as both the other panelists mentioned. It's so important to be passionate and to really work hard. No one else is going to really care about your baby as much as you do. So yeah.
Thank you very much. By the way, Don and Eric are both Suffolk graduates, what we call Rams. Is one of you are you a double Ram? And Eric's a double, one degree. All right. Thank you very much. Chaim?
So, we hear these great stories, and everybody loves hearing these amazing entrepreneurship stories that are really interesting and exciting, but we know it's really hard to be an entrepreneur also. So, one of the questions we talked about a lot in our group was, these challenging moments. And I guess I'm curious, throughout your career, what was the most challenging thing that you ran into in running your business or founding your business? And then I think maybe even more importantly, what kept you going in those times? Because it's so easy to just stop. Should we go back the other way? Should we start with Eric and go back? Let's do that.
Oh, Eric.
We'll snake.
Eric was thinking.
Yeah, but this is an easy one for me, and I don't really necessarily want to talk about it. Well, of course I can, and I will, I guess, at this point.
Therapy session.
The hardest thing that not just me, but actually the whole world had to deal with recently is obviously COVID, right? From a number of different fronts. But for us professionally, I went from 537 employees on March 15th to 0. It's, takes you a lifetime to build something that you're really passionate about, and then all of a sudden it's all gone, literally within an instant. And you're just sort of left worrying, what are you going to do? My sort of real estate that was briefly mentioned in my bio, that was, part of my sort of COVID pivot. But before that, sticking to COVID, for me, I actually found that to be the most important time in my professional career, dealing with COVID. All of my employees were looking up at me. I usually look down. I hate saying that. They're in the production, right? So I am judging them. I am monitoring them. Is the food correct? Are the premises clean? How's your hospitality? So it's all from the top down typically. And it's sort of easy from where, I sit, or from where we sit, generally speaking. But now it was the other way around. It was 537 people looking up at me and saying, Eric, what are you going to do? I got to feed my families. I got to continue my life. There's, and again, particularly with undocumented immigrants, which is a real story, and not for now, they didn't have services and support. And so as an entrepreneur, to me, that was the best moment in my professional career. Like, all right, awesome. Every shot I make, all these people depend on it. And so for me, that was amazing. I'm so proud to say that we've reopened all of our restaurants. We've supported our communities. Actually, early on in COVID, we went back to our investor group. We raised money, and all of our undocumented came, and they cooked food for actual first responders. We cooked food for Chelsea and Everett and all the communities that didn't have the opportunity to feed themselves, and all of that other good stuff. I mean, it was really ground level, boots on the ground, which was really amazing. All of my restaurants have reopened. They're all thriving. I've actually opened since COVID, and we have 2 more that we're opening up over the next 6 months. And so for me as an entrepreneur, that was the best. I mean, I got called to duty. It was effing awesome. Anyway,
I'm going to tack one just kind of extra on that. Also, what keeps you up at night? Just the one thing that you think about at night.
it's those 537 employees. It's my job to ensure that the company is stable, that everyone is getting a paycheck, that our guests, we serve about 20,000 guests a week, which is a lot of people. So I got to worry about all of those. I got to worry about all the paychecks that are going to happen every Friday. And so that is what really keeps me up at night.
All right. Thank you.
For me, I think what stands out as the hardest time was first, prior to me having built a team for the first year, essentially working on it by myself. The ups and downs of a startup are really hard to take when it's just you and you have no one else to share it with. And I think the earlier stage you are, the more those up and downs hit you like every single day or hour. And you get rejected just so many times, whether it's from investors, whether it's from you try an idea and you put it out there and someone's like, this is terrible. And you're like, I just spent all week working on this. I think it's really hard to get through some of those times. And that's where like the early fortitude, I love people getting together in a forum like this. Like, you should make sure to meet at least one new person in this room by the end of this, because if you find someone else who's passionate about going into entrepreneurship, even if you two never work together, at least you'll have a support system to be able to talk with about when something's not going right. And that's really important, that you're willing to share those things. I think the second hardest time for me was when we basically were about to run out of money. We had 28 employees at the time, and I had done the calculations and knew that in our bank account, we could only pay salary for another 30 days. So genius 21-year-old Wes decided to take a notepad of sticky notes, write day 30 on it, and then every day down to 0. And each day I would walk in and I'd take one off, and it would tell me who I had to fire that day so that we could actually make it to day 30. I still have that notepad, and I only got to day 22 before I just couldn't do it anymore. And we were fortunate that we were able to close a round of funding with 7 days left. But the reason why I tell that is just because like we've almost died so many times along the way. But during that time, I was a zombie of a person because no one in the company knew that that was where we were at. People were really confused why I was firing them. And I later figured out, if you just tell your team and like trust them and just treat them like you would want to be treated in that situation, knowing the information, people, the next time we almost ran out of money, they were like, I don't need a salary. It was like half the company volunteered to just work without a salary for the couple of weeks when we needed it. So it was definitely one of the hardest times, but I learned from it. And I hope that no one else follows that mistake, because it was definitely a dark time when that happened. What keeps me up at night, for sure, is just our consumers. I feel an immense responsibility right now. Does anyone here use Fetch? And yeah, couple. Okay. So if you think about like right now, so what our app does is we reward people for all their everyday shopping that they do. Think like everyday items, the groceries that you're buying and putting into your cabinets. And right now, inflation has made those items more and more expensive. And we have about 20 million monthly active consumers across the country who use us, and we basically pay them for utilizing the program. And we help them save hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's all the more important right now because people's wages aren't just magically increasing. The amount of people who reach out to us and say, like, my Fetch points are what I use to provide my family dinner at the end of the month when I run out of a paycheck, is definitely the motivation for our team. So what keeps me up at night is when we're not delivering as well as we could for them. We're not growing fast enough to be able to help more people who need that, or pushing our partners hard enough to provide savings back to consumers. So that's definitely what keeps me still engaged in Fetch 10 years later, and still very motivated to keep going.
Excellent. So the biggest challenge I think I've faced, and it's been multiple times, is when our company has missed its sales forecast and we didn't know why. And it's actually one time at Equalogic, we grew 30% quarter to quarter throughout the entire history of the company, except for Q3 of 2006, and we went backwards. It was so, and we had forecast hitting our number just 4 weeks prior, in a board meeting. I got a visit from one of the board members, and he said, Don, you have ruined the company. What are you going to do about it? And so, and by the way, our sales leader said, oh, he just gave some standard sales answers. The competition beat us too often. We had a product delay. The channel isn't working for us. And, but none of them were quantifiable. And so The only way I knew how to deal with it was to lean into the problem. And actually, I think that's for any challenge you face. And as an entrepreneur, you're going to face challenges all the time. You've got to lean into them. And where you can, lean into them quantitatively, not just qualitatively or on a gut basis. And so actually at Equalogic, I leaned into the problem, took a financial analyst, and we looked at an immense number of things that could have gone wrong. And we actually pinpointed exactly what had gone wrong, and we were able to fix it. By the way, that sales leader lost his job because he didn't come up with a solution. I had to do it myself with the support of a really exceptional financial analyst. One thing that I want to say, the whole idea of if you're going to be an entrepreneur, take accounting, take finance, you have to know the business. You can't just rely on others. You have to know the business just as well or better than anyone else.
That's why we always talk about being an entrepreneur and a accountant, being an entrepreneur and a finance major, because putting those skills together are so valuable. I got to say though, listening to all of you talk, just thinking about the amount of stress that people deal with in starting and running their companies, it's also, we talk to our students about this. It's so important to have a support system for yourself into self-care, because sometimes we get so into things that I think you use the term dark times, Wes, like it can get really tough. So make sure you have that support system, whether it's people you meet, whether it's friends, family, or even professors. Okay, I'll let Sherry go.
Yeah, and I can attest to that. So I've done this 5 times. It is very lonely at the top. I don't know if you guys, right? It's just, you don't have a lot of people that you can easily talk with. Anyway, guys, we have another question for you. So a business is only as good as its people. And you've talked a lot about employees as well as your customers. How did you go about deciding the people you're going to work with, your partners, your team? How did you choose mentors? And how has that changed as you and your companies have grown? Shall we go back to Wes? We'll start with you.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Seems fair.
Also, for whoever's online, I can see your comments and I love it. That's very cool. Interact with us. Let's see, for team, I think nowadays, it's actually probably been true the entire time. Surrounding yourself with people who are smarter than you at what you're bringing them in to do is really important. I think it takes a lot to check your own ego to be confident enough to know that you're bringing someone in who is just going to run rings around you for whatever it is that they're doing. But I think it's really important. You get to learn faster because of it. They will help you see things that you otherwise just wouldn't have seen. And if you just hire a bunch of people who are going to just listen and do exactly what you tell them, I guess like somewhat, what's the point of that? It doesn't seem like it'll scale much past yourself. I do believe like our number one, internal belief and value is transparency though. Like at the end of the day, if you bring in A players, the amazing thing about A players is you can give them whatever information it is that they need and then get out of their way. They'll solve problems. Like you don't have to micromanage or look over. You can help them set challenging goals and you can hold them accountable to it. But at the end of the day, if you're hiring people that are really good at what they do and push you to be better, then it's just going to create a win-win cycle on that one. So I think there's also like no easy way of like getting your hiring percentage rate to be consistently anywhere north of like 75% in my opinion. Because a lot of it is you just, if you have that gut feeling, this person seems right, you're working off of relatively finite information. It's really helpful when they've worked with someone that in your network who can vouch for them, because that tells you a lot more than a resume. I think it's why it's so helpful that if you're applying for a job, if there's some way for you to network to someone in that company, it goes a long way because it makes you stand out all of a sudden, because more than just what a piece of paper will tell us about what you've done in your career, we can ask someone we trust about why you're good to work with, and they probably have a lot more experience than that. So I think it's really important to kind of follow that gut, but look for the information that can give you additional signals beyond what's on the piece of paper for what they're going to do.
Excellent. I'll go. So on that last point, one of the things that we do when hiring people is spend way more time doing back channel reference checking than interviewing or testing, because people can be really good, especially when you're hiring salespeople. They're salespeople. They can convince you that they're excellent. So if you don't dig deep and find people who worked with them to learn what they're really all about, you're not going to hire great people. Actually, a friend of mine who's a venture capitalist and was an entrepreneur used to teach a course at the Sloan School that was called New Enterprise. And one of his classes was about avoidable mistakes. And he interviewed 20 venture capitalists and 30 entrepreneurs, and he came up with 4 most common mistakes. And the number one mistake by far was people. And one of the big things he discovered is that people, just didn't put the work in to make sure that they were hiring people who were going to make a great contribution. And one thing that we use is something that I call the iceberg principle, which if something seems just a little bit off, it's like an iceberg. There's something way bigger underneath, and you really need to dig to figure out if that suspicion or that curiosity about something just seems wrong. You've got to then dig extra hard to make sure you're going to bring someone onto your team who's going to make a big impact in the company.
We definitely make a lot of mistakes, and learning from them is always important for us. As we grow our company and we want to increase sales by 5, 10, 20%, for us, it's not that easy to say, okay, turn up production, turn on your, widgets or whatever. We have to go find a whole other location, and that entails sort of, hiring brand new management executives for that location. So we're constantly hiring and constantly looking. So, big motto for us is hire slowly and fire quickly. That has been something that has worked out really, really well for us. And also taking our time. And again, it's a little bit of a non-traditional industry that I'm in. Most of my staff are client-facing, guest-facing. So it's very important for me that they have the soft skills to be able to interact with our guests, regardless of what it may be. I mean, the dishwasher may have to go grab, a bucket of dishes from the front of house, and a guest may be looking for a glass of water. So, we don't necessarily have back of house people that don't interact. So every level of employee for us is critically important, taking on the perspective of our guests. And lastly, again, a little bit of a different industry, 49% technical skill, 51% soft skill for us. We don't necessarily care so much. Can you cut a tomato? Can you wash a dish? Can you make a drink? We're going to teach you all of that stuff. But how do you interact with your guests? How do you interact with your teams? Because that's a skill set that is extremely important to us and extremely, extremely hard to teach. And then sort of the other thing that, we do, part of the sort of taking it slow to hire executives, we'll take them out to dinner, invite your wife, your friends, pick a restaurant. Let's go. What do you like to eat? And how do you interact in public? So that for us, as Don, you'd mentioned, it's very easy to interview really, really well. But what happens in the real world? And for us, that is the real world. So that's something, a little trait that we sort of do.
Thank you. Not surprisingly, we're running a little bit behind. So for this session, in terms of the directed questions, I think I'm just going to ask one person a question. And if somebody obviously wants to ask them, please feel free to jump in. But we'll kind of focus on the people that we had the directed questions to. So Eric, I'm actually going to start back with you, if that's okay. This is a really interesting one, especially for someone who researches entrepreneurship. We think about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs as particularly risk tolerant people. And I think of your industry as a particularly risky industry. So I'm curious how you view risk and how that's changed over time.
Yep. Risk is important, and particularly in my industry, lots of capital to get started on your first restaurant. I don't care if it's a corner, little sub shop, pizza shop, or something bigger and more detailed. You know, I mean, again, for a small little pizza shop, you might need a few $100,000 to, you know, $10 million regard, you know, of that range. So what I always try to tell people trying to get into my industry is something that I learned really early on. Sort of, you have your entrepreneur here, and then you have your venture here, and there's an abyss. And if you fall in that abyss, good luck trying to get out. It is, you know, in our industry, it is real. So try to bridge that gap, try to make that as close to, as, you know, to come together as possible. It'll never touch, but that's part of being an entrepreneur. And so what I tell people is try to just take a step over that. You know, that leap of faith is a walk of faith. It's a step of faith. It isn't this, I need, you know, 100 meters running start to do this jump. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. You know, part of it is go get experience in the particular industry that you want to become an entrepreneur in. Surrounding yourself with some really great investors, some really, really great partners, again, to limit this risk here. And how has it changed over time? It really hasn't. I mean, every location that we open, I feel like we're a little bit smarter, and that gap is getting just, you know, smaller and smaller. But McDonald's closes restaurants, Starbucks closes restaurants. I mean, the best of the best will close. And, you know, we haven't closed a restaurant yet. I know it's going to happen at some day. You know, hopefully not anytime soon. But again, we still live with that reality, and it's an important reality to know. So we, you know, try not to have too big of a chip of on our shoulder. Try to be, you know, very present in the moment, in the day, and understanding that that risk is real. COVID was real. A snowstorm is real. And, you know, a general manager quitting is real. So again, we just try to, like, you know, make this gap every single day as small as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. So I'm going to go to Wes. Wes, a lot of people, including my students, want to start a business. An issue that comes up, though, is how to garner resources. You've done this at so many levels, from business plan competitions to a $240 million Series E round. How do you go about this? What have you found to be most important as you approach each raise?
I'll start by, just because we have a bunch of students here, I'll talk about that business plan thing for a second, because I thought that was a scrappy way of doing it. So my sophomore year, I was in a business class, and they told us to write a business plan for one of the classes. So I turned to the person next to me, who later became my co-founder, and told him, "Hey, I've been working on something for the last 9 months. Why don't we write it together?" He said, "Sure." So we finished it, and it was like 14 pages. And to me, that seemed like a lot of work for something that I was probably never actually going to use. So I was like, what else can we do with this? I know, our school has a business plan competition. So University of Wisconsin puts one on, and the winner gets $20,000. So I was really interested by that. But I started to wonder, other schools have to have these too. So I started calling my friends from high school, and I found out some of them going to Boston College, University of Massachusetts Amherst, a bunch of schools all across the country. And I would send them the business plan and said, put your name on it, put me as a co-author, and let's enter. Let's see how we do. So in the last 45 days of school for me, I flew around the country, and we won $185,000. They weren't too happy about it. I'm glad that's why I'm not here at BC right now. I don't think they would allow me. But we found the gray area, and we played within it. And what that allowed is, like, they write those checks to you personally. So I was able to keep the lion's share of my company because I was the first money into it. And I found scrappy ways of being able to do that. And it paid dividends long term, so that you can hold on to control of the company and make sure that you keep, driving it in a direction that you want. The later rounds, they very much shift. I mean, our last round that was mentioned, it's very much about the business, and the numbers kind of speak for themselves. But at the end of the day, even our investor who put in $240 million in the last round, we are still talking about, our goal is to 10x his investment. Like that's our goal at this point. We don't think that where we're at right now is anywhere close to the finish line. So a lot of it for us in fundraising is about talking about the future. Your numbers have to speak for themselves in terms of the past and what you've been able to accomplish, but you're still trying to help people see the vision that you and the company have for what's missing in the US or the world in our case. So a lot of it is that eternal optimism, that ability to convince others that the way you see the world is not only a possible outcome, but one you could create. And if you can do that, people want to get behind it because one, they want to make money off of it, but two, they want to support that typically. And then you can utilize those resources to accelerate and actually go, drive that vision that you have further, faster, quicker. But yeah, those are the couple of different stages for us.
I would be mad at myself if I didn't make this plug. Number one, a bunch of the things I love. I actually love the legitimacy lies and all the different things. I think it's such a cool way to do it. But we have a business plan competition. So for all of our Suffolk students watching tonight, come try to win our business plan competition. We want to give you the money. We're out there trying to get more to try to support you, but we need you to come and get involved in the business plan competitions. And for all you students from Wisconsin out there listening, maybe stay there. All right. So, Don, for you, as a 5-time CEO, somebody who has led many different organizations, you must have seen a lot of different organizational cultures. And I guess I'm curious, as the leader, how do you go in and either shape the organization, their culture as to how you want it, or adapt to a totally different culture?
So yeah, as a hired CEO, there was a culture put in place by the founding teams in every one of the companies. Interestingly, in only one of them was it codified. And so really the challenge I had was working with the founding team, actually also observing what the culture was, because it's not always what's written down, and then working together with the team to codify a culture. The best example of that was at Equalogic. We ended every company meeting with a slide that had 4 words on it: passion, hunger, paranoia. I had to think for a second. Paranoia and, oh boy, it'll come to me in a second. I don't know why. But anyhow, it was codified, and it's just really important to take what a founding team has done, for them to be really aware that it's important as a company grows. And then it is important to codify it, because that's the only way you're going to be able to make sure that everyone who joins the team understands what they're signing up for and what their life is going to be in the company.
Thank you. So I think for time, I'm going to go ahead and move over to some of the freshman questions. We have a couple freshman questions, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. But so we went around to a bunch of different freshman classes and just got kind of some different things they were curious about, and what if they were sitting at dinner with you, what they'd want to ask. So this is from Kelvin, and I thought this was a really interesting question that he had. He said, there's a misconception around CEOs that as they expand their business and it gets bigger, it's hard to remain moral. So how did you keep a moral compass as you grew your company?
Sure, I can start. For me, I think we might be one of the ones guilty of not having a codified culture, actually, now that I think about it. But we try to do it through showing it through our actions. So every Monday, I live do an hour company welcome to all new hires. And I tell them about why we started the business, where we're at today, what's important to us, how we're going to carry ourselves, how we're going to make decisions, and talk about why team matters so much too. So I've always told my team, they're like, why don't you just record a video and press play? Because if I think about it, I've done this over the last 3 years, every single Monday. So it's a lot of Mondays. But people only believe you when you actually put your effort into it. And I found with like any of the different things that have happened that the company wants to know what's going on, there's no subsidy for you just spending the time with them. Every single person in the company has my Slack, my email, my phone number. They can reach out. I tell them that at the end of the day, I feel safe and comfortable being my full authentic self at work every single day. So that is the bare minimum I expect for everyone in our company, that they need to feel safe and comfortable bringing their full authentic selves to work. And if that is ever crossed the line, we will absolutely show through our actions that we don't stand for that. And when everyone knows that that is the line that has been drawn, and I tell them the rest of culture is up to you. Like, make the culture what you want. Our culture constantly evolves and changes, and I love it because it's driven by our team. But I stay connected by reminding everyone, taking the ownership, telling people it's on my shoulders at the end of the day. Everything does stop with me, and I am responsible for it. And I think by doing that, people see. I mean, we've had to do layoffs before, and when you get up in front of someone and start breaking down in front of the entire company, it's like you can't fake that. Like, it's at the end of the day, it's hitting you hard. Just knowing that you let people down. So I think the only way of staying moral is staying super connected to it, and not being, shy to share your views on things. I don't think you should ever impose your views, but if you share them and let people hear and engage in dialogue about whatever the conversation is, it leads to a really healthy workplace where people feel comfortable to be themselves, ask hard, challenging questions, and then that ends up translating into a really good working culture where people aren't afraid to say the bad things that are happening, so that you know what problems to dive after and go tackle. So yeah, that's what we've done.
Eric?
Great. Oh,
Yeah, sorry.
Excellent points by Wes, and he's exactly spot on. But I don't think that as a CEO, and maybe I sort of misheard that question, but the morals don't change as your company grows or as you're a CEO. Is that what sort of the question alluded to?
I think they suggested there was a kind of view in the public of, as people grow their businesses,
Got it.
they really stop focusing on, these other
Sure.
things.
Yeah, I mean, again, not from where I sit. The morality of the company and the morality of what we do is critically important. It's our ethos. It starts at the top and it goes all the way down to the bottom. But as we grow, my moral compass and my partner's moral compasses doesn't change. I just have to make different decisions based on a larger organization or a decision that's going to better, the rest of the organization. But I think, and again, in our industry, running, and particularly in this day and age, running a great culture in your organization is sort of the most important thing. And again, particularly to what we do, and what a lot of CEOs do, it's our staff are the ones that are interacting. They're the ones that are producing. So it's very important for them to be happy, to have a future, and to look forward to keep coming back.
That's great. Don?
So I don't think it's that CEO or a leadership team necessarily, suddenly drifts from a moral perspective. It's more observing across the company whether individuals are beginning to cross the line, because people in your company are super aware of everything, whether it's, hey, this person is underperforming and they haven't been fired yet, or someone, and this happens a lot in sales, someone crosses a line, a moral line, in a deal or in a partnership, and there are people who know. And so you have to extinguish those as fast as possible, because I think then an entire company would drift if people started to see that, crossing the line morally was being tolerated.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It kind of comes to that trickle down effect. I hear all of you talking about your customers and your employees, and how it just always comes back to how important that is to you. And then it comes down from the top. If that's important to you, it seems like everybody in the organization comes that same way. I think that's great. I think we should probably open it up to some questions from the audience. So if you have a question, just throw your hand up, and we have somebody coming around with a mic to take the questions.
It's a tough question.
Hey, good evening. I was just wondering, how do you hire people qualified when you're at a low salary cap and you can't provide the salaries that you want to for the people that are qualified in the upper management levels? Thank you.
We might have very different. For us, when we would balance it out with equity. So we were always paying way below market, but I believed it was really important, and still to this day, every employee has a ownership stake at Fetch. Early on, they would just have a lot more. There was a lot of millionaires created from early employees who, instead of taking a full salary, came in well under market, but were willing to take some options. It's high risk though. Like the reality is I always was super transparent with people. It's like, you're not going to be able to pay your bills with this anytime in the near future, but if we do well, then you'll do well. But that's the risk reward. And the other reality is there were some people that we could just never get the calculus to work. They had, 3 kids or something, and they just had a certain amount of monthly expenses they couldn't live with under, and we couldn't pay them at the same level. But I think, again, leading with like an open, honest conversation about that, helping them understand the risk and reward of what they're doing was super important. And sometimes we then had to say, okay, well, we can't afford the best person in this space. So that's okay. We'll take this person who's scrappy that we can hopefully train up and try to elevate them into it. So a lot early on was taking people who were way underqualified, had no business getting the job, and just taking a bet on them, and then putting your own effort and time to try to grow them along the way. But if you're limited on resources, those are like the 2 levers you have.
That's great. Anybody else, or we can just go another question, whatever.
Yeah. No. Yeah, let's go to another question. Okay.
You don't want to answer
Could I add one?
Well, yeah. Let me, yeah, sorry.
All right, one quick thing.
No, yeah, only because Wes said my industry is different, and it actually is. For every one of my restaurants, we have it's a very specific and rigid P&L. So when a general manager comes to me and says, I have this executive chef, but he wants X, Y, and Z, my sort of come back to them is, show me how this P&L is going to work. We actually, because it's such a different industry, we actually rather overpay, our managers, because retention for us is critically important, because that time that I spent on having you slice that tomato, if you find another job a month, 2 months, 3 months, now I have to start from the beginning. So we actually like to overpay, particularly for our management positions, hopefully that they're going to stay with us for a very long time. And it's actually proved out to be very, very good for us. But again, it works in our industry because it's a very specific P&L, and we need to be profitable from day one of operations. So that's, a little different perspective.
Did everyone make note of that?
Yeah, I just had one thing, and it's that it's seeking people who have a passion for what you're doing, because they are willing to make compromises in order to participate in that passion and in the dream that you have.
Thank you.
I think we have a question over here.
Yeah. Hi, I'm a freshman here at Suffolk. My question was that I'm sure you've all had to make some hard decisions. You found yourself at a crossroads. I was wondering that if you could go back in any one of your ventures, change one thing, do something a little bit differently, what would you do with what you know now?
Ooh.
I can
ahead,
take a
guys.
shot at that. So, first time I was a CEO, I got fired. And what I would do differently is, one thing is that, I'd come from a great experience, a company that was super successful in going to market and growing rapidly. And I tried to take what we had done there and just use it as a playbook with this new company. And I actually also hired people who bought into that and were like-minded. Wes earlier talked about, you want to get people who can challenge you, who are better than you, because there's 3 forms of knowledge: the things you know, the things you know you don't know, and often you hire for the people who know what you don't know. But the biggest form of knowledge for an entrepreneur is the things you don't know that you don't know, because that's what's going to bite you in the butt. But I would say, so again, what I would do differently is I would not come in with a playbook. I'd learn and build the playbook, because the playbook's different in every single company. And the second thing is, make darn sure that I don't hire people just because they're like-minded with me.
Either of you want to answer that?
I think, just to be really simple, my biggest thing, I think the work that all of us do, I tell my team this all the time, the work that we do is very important, but don't take it so seriously. I think that's really important because we're all choosing to go and do this and spend our lives spending so much time and effort and energy on this. Like, have fun with it. Otherwise, what the heck's the point of it? So I always encourage the team, like, don't take it so seriously. We can make mistakes. Don't lack the importance of what we're doing. But I've always thought that that was really important, and I wish I would have done that earlier.
Yeah, just, my last comment is, our hockey stick growth has really happened when we've made mistakes. And, we make mistakes every single day, but that is what has really changed the trajectory for us. Because whenever we get too pompous in our decision making, it's sort of like we run out of steam. It's when we make those mistakes that we get it back. We have to get back to the drawing table. That's the most eye-opening.
Thank you.
Any other questions out there? Oh, do we have a microphone?
It's coming.
Yeah,
coming.
we've got two people here.
All right, which, here?
We've got one here and one here. Oh, and then one there.
All right.
But you
Sorry, I
only
only
have
have
two microphones.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is a question for all the panelists. Like, when you're in a workflow and like you get out of that workflow because of like rough patches, how do you get back into that workflow and how do you maintain that workflow?
I think that's going to be extremely like individually driven. For me, I get outside, I go for a walk, like no matter what's going on, go for a run, just try to take a moment to recenter yourself. Because if you're really, really stressed, you haven't slept in 2 days, like you're not going to make a good decision. Just recently, the Silicon Valley bank crisis, I'm sure some people heard, we had 98% of our cash there and we did not get it out. What did we do that weekend? I pulled my team together. We went for a team run and then we sat down and we figured out what the heck to do next. And like, there's no way, like you're going to have all these disruptions that hit you. So it's really important you try to reground yourself. That's why I said my last lesson would have been, I wouldn't take things so seriously. You make really bad decisions when you're only thinking about here in the moment and you're acting out of fear. You make really good decisions when you've kind of balanced yourself out. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to have perfect work-life balance. That doesn't exist. I always feel it's just work. Some people look at my days and say that's no work-life balance, but for me, it is. So I think it's super individual what you do in that situation.
I think that's perfect.
Okay. So we are getting to the end of time here. Why don't we do one more question and then I have a quick, just fire last piece of advice.
I think we had a question over here. Yeah, go ahead.
So when you're getting your start, whether it be you have an invention or an idea or a business or whatever, it can kind of feel like a catch-22 where you can't get the funding to realize your idea without an investment, and investors won't give you that funding until they can see your idea already having been realized, right? To know that it works. So I was wondering, I suppose, what's the methodology or the logic you want to have when you're starting out, when you feel like you can't get the funding to realize the idea and you can't realize the idea to get the funding? That kind of sort of just beginning area.
I think you kind of covered it before.
Yeah, I mean, what I did, I can't program. My idea was an app. So you can see catch-22 there. So I started by drawing on the back of index cards what each screen would look like. And then I went into Microsoft Paint and I took screenshots and I mocked up what it would look like. And I showed the investors, okay, so here's what it looks like. I'd press a button, turn it. I was in my photo album. I'd swipe to the next screen and say, and here's what happens next. You just completely faked it. Like the key is you were trying to show what the invention or anything would have the potential of doing. And you have to sometimes help them get over this giant chasm between like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I don't understand what that would look like. You got to get really creative on different ways to do that. There are always going to be ways for you to figure out how to put it together to show someone of what you're trying to get to. A lot of people get caught up in being like, well, that seems ridiculous. It's so much work. How can you do that? That's not scalable. Doesn't matter. Like that's not what you're trying to prove early on. So I think there's lots of ways to do it. I don't think there's ever a solution unless you're a multi-time like if you're a successful multi-entrepreneur, people will throw money at you just because they trust you and they know that you have a team around you. So unless our room's full of that, then instead you're not going to be able to just shortcut and magically get a bunch of money. So you have to then solve it on the other side. You got to get creative and convince them. And you can do that. I promise. Like there's lots of ways of doing it.
You're in good company, Wes, because Steve Jobs faked a lot of the smartphone intro.
No way.
So with the time, I just want to have a quick last fire for all of you in like 2 seconds or maybe like 30 seconds. One, so, we have a lot of freshmen and sophomores and college students watching this who are interested in starting businesses or might be interested in starting a business. If you're going to tell them one thing, what would it be?
Resilience. Everyone know the Chumbawamba song? I get knocked down, I get up again. You're never going to keep me down.
I love it.
Entrepreneurs face problems every hour, every day, and some of them it's like a big slap in the face, and you got to get back up and figure out what you're going to do next.
As an entrepreneurial passion researcher, I love that. I love that answer.
As I look out and I think about, we have a bunch of young folks like myself that are here thinking about doing this. As Eric was saying, go find something you're passionate about and then get creative with how you break through to be able to do something about that. Our world will be such a better world if people are doing things that they're passionate about. You may not know how it's going to tie into the bigger picture today, but I promise you that if you go and chase after whatever it is and finding a way of maybe tangentially being involved in something you're passionate about, you will produce more good for the world that everyone will benefit from. You'll be surrounding yourself all of a sudden magically. People around you will be people who are more passionate about what they do and are just interested and excited to talk about, and they'll get the best out of you. So I think early on, don't get discouraged by it. Don't feel like you have to go and work for 10 years before you can go figure that out. Like, you should have the audacity to believe that you can do what you're passionate about and find a way around it.
Thank you.
Eric,
They already
bring
come
us
on.
home.
This is the toughest thing, going last. No, I mean, honestly, it's about being passionate. I mean, what a cheap answer. You guys have already used it, but it's real. No one can ever take that away from you. If you're really passionate about building this widget, building this app, building this whatever it is, no one will ever take that away from you. And you're going to work hard to ensure that it's successful. You're going to learn throughout the way. Is it working? Is it not working? And I find that to be the most important thing. I see a lot of people who are, again, in my industry, they bake a muffin and this is the best muffin, so I'm going to go open up a muffin shop. Well, are you really passionate entrepreneur to open up a muffin shop, or you just really like making your muffin? Man, that sounds weird. But it's the people that are truly passionate about building a company and serving their communities and their guests. I find that is the most important.
Well, thank you all very much. This has been just an amazing evening for me. I really enjoyed all of your answers, and thank